Okay, children, let's lay back. And now, allow your eyes to close as you imagine that you are outdoors in a very quiet, peaceful, safe place. This may be a place that you've been to that was quiet and safe and calm. Or it may be an imaginary place. See and feel yourself there. See the colors, hear the sounds, feel the wind, notice the sky. Sense what's around you, what you can touch. And notice how calm and quiet and peaceful you are in this safe, special place. Stay there and enjoy your special place for a few seconds.
Well, what in the world is going on? Do parents realize the incredible mind manipulation that is taking place in the public schools? Do they realize that their children are being exposed to New Age techniques that lead to the altered states of consciousness? And if they recognize it, do they object? Or do they think that today's education professionals have it all under control and they know exactly what they're doing? One thing is for sure. In the research that we did for this video, and the research that my wife Patty did for our special report, we know for a fact that we are witnessing a whole new generation of children out there. When we talk to the kids today, we realize that they are now raised in the video age. Instead of playing kick the can and hide and seek and football and baseball, they spend time in front of their VCR. They have a television set with hundreds of channels instead of just the one or two that when we had as kids. And now they have easy access to MTV and their heavy metal rock bands preaching that message to them. They have their computers that they tap into to play incredible computer games that we could have never imagined. The ones that cost us just a few years ago for a quarter to play every few seconds, they're now virtually addicted to these computers in their homes. They watch the cartoons from morning until evening, and the 7-hour statistics that we had of children watching TV apparently are very, very accurate. And all we see in all of these things are heavy doses of occultism. By the time the kids enter the public schools, they already have an education without realizing it. They have been fully indoctrinated into the ideas of Hinduism and Buddhism and the occult and the New Age. There's the cartoons, the MTV, and if we talk about the most popular cartoon in the world today, we should talk about The Simpsons. When the kids turn on the Simpsons cartoon, far from getting just some friendly little cartoon, they are getting messages that, as we shall see as we go on in this special report, that are providing them with both a hatred of Christianity and the underlying techniques of the New Age movement. Now, we want to talk a little bit about the public schools before we get rolling, but before we start, the first thing we should talk about is the National Education Association. We may think that this is just a group of people dedicated to raising our children in the best way that they can, but the NEA is much more than that. The National Education Association, by its own admission, is a socialist organization. It is anti-God, anti-country, anti-life. It strongly supports abortion on demand. It is pro-globalist and pro-New Age. The National Education is declaredly trying to provide the way and lead the way towards a new world order and a new age of peace and prosperity. In fact, by their own admission, here's what the NEA says. It is with sobering awareness that we set about to change the course of American education by embracing the ideals of global community, the equality and interdependence of all peoples and nations, and education as a tool to bring about world peace. But that's not all. Far from wanting to change the social structure of the country and the way that the children view the world in the area of politics, the NEA also has spirituality well within their targets. For instance, Dr. Chester Pierce, in an address given to 2,000 teachers in Denver, said this: "Every child in America who enters school at the age of 5 is mentally ill, because he comes to school with allegiance towards our elected officials, toward our founding fathers, toward our institutions, toward this form of government we have. Patriotism, nationalism, sovereignty. All of this proves that the children are sick, because the truly well individual is one who has rejected all of those things and is what I would call the true international child of the future. If you don't think it's real, we have to see the children's textbooks and all of the other programs and the paraphernalia that comes along with the public school system. If we take a careful look at what our children are learning today, it's values clarification, which simply teaches that there are absolutely no absolutes. And the contradiction of this statement is obviously clear. There's sensitivity training, situational ethics, that our morals and our ethics should change depending on the situation, death education, suicide education. We wonder why so many kids are committing suicide. Let's not forget that the ideas they're hearing in the rock bands and the heavy metal music are being enforced by programs they're taking in the public schools. There's sex education, globalism. The National Education Association is absolutely committed to moving this world towards a new world order. And to do so, they want to change the way our children view the world. And there's the all-important concept that's in the public schools now of tolerance and understanding, that we have to accept all views as equal, that we can't have the bigoted ideas of Christianity that we have seen in the past, that they perceive them this way, that instead we have to have an agreement that says simply, all roads lead to Rome. Literally everything that is going on in the public schools is serving to undermine the Christian worldview. Our children are being lobotomized by behavioral psychologists, and the parents don't know because they believe these educational professionals have the best interests of their children in mind. They have no idea that the National Education Association has its own agenda. We have now a case of emotional and spiritual child molestation. Here's what Tex Myers had to say about it in his book, Ravaged by the New Age. In Buffalo, New York, an elementary school teacher led her students through a silva mind control visualization exercise so they could actually see and talk with the long-dead spirits of George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and other famous men from the dead. In Round Rock, Texas, fourth graders of a world culture class were told by their teacher to put their backs against the wall, stretch forth their arms and their hands, and chant, "All hail the power of the mighty globe." We'll compare that kind of thing coming into the public schools with the teacher or the young boy, two instances where they brought a Bible into the public school system. There was national uproar as religion entered the public schools. But as we can see, there is a division here between the acceptable New Age religion and Christianity, which has been thrown out the front door of the classrooms. We are in a war. There is another gospel in the land, and it is making war on the Christian heritage of this nation right in our public school classrooms. Listen to this statement by John Dumphy, written in the Humanist magazine. I am convinced that the battle for humankind's future must be waged and won in the public school classroom by teachers who correctly perceive their role as proselytizers of a new faith. These teachers must embody the same selfless dedication as the most rabid fundamentalist preachers, for they will be ministers of another sort, utilizing a classroom instead of a pulpit to convey humanist values in whatever subject they teach. The classroom must and will become an arena of conflict between the old and the new, the rotting corpse of Christianity together with all its adjacent evils and miseries, and the new faith of humanism, resplendent in its promise of a world in which the never-realized Christian ideal of love thy neighbor will finally be achieved. Proverbs 22:6 tells us to train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he's old he will not depart from it. The truth of that statement is simple, that if we will raise up our children in biblical principles, he will become skilled in using the Word of God. And he will know that when a situation arises without even being instructed and told how to do it, he will draw upon that training and he will react in the proper way. And he will know to have faith in God and call on the power of God and stand upon his Word in the face of trials. But these children are being trained up in another way. And when they face problems in this life and in this world, they are not going to have that biblical foundation and faith in God to draw on. Instead, they are going to turn to mystical powers and magical spells and incantations that they have learned in all of their games. We have a non-biblical worldview which is coming in, occultism and the casting of spells, and this is what they are going to use in the days ahead when they are in need of spiritual help.
From beyond any known galaxy, bringing with them the laws and ideals of their doomed planet Thundera, come the Thundercats. Jaga, the wise. Tigra, the invisible. Chitara, the quick. Wily Cat and Wily Kit, a cunning junior duo. Hand Troll, the deadly. And the Snot, the Thundercats, all sworn to serve their young lord, Lion-O, and to instruct him in the secrets of the Eye of Thundera. The eye embedded in the hilt of the mystic Sword of Omens, and the source of the Thundercats' power. Thunder, 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 Thundercats, ho!
Well, even a casual look at some of today's cartoons makes it clear. The message that our children are getting when they get up early Saturday morning for the cartoons or before school on the weekdays is one of pure, unadulterated occultism. Goodbye to the days of Yogi Bear and Huckleberry Hound. Today we now see the world of He-Man and She-Ra, the masters of the universe, and as we have seen here, the Thundercats. You will notice that our kids, without even realizing it, are becoming experts on the New Age. They're becoming experts on Hinduism and on the powers of the occult, and they didn't even know they were gaining such an education. As we'll see, and as you just saw in this Thundercats cartoon, we have the message of the third eye. We went into a toy store and bought one of the swords, and the kids play with these swords, and they hold it exactly like we saw in the cartoon, and begin to think about the power of opening this third eye. The third eye is simply the same old ideas that have been around in the occult for many years. It is the idea that somehow we can look beyond our natural eye. Somehow we can have sense, this sixth sense, that can see beyond what the normal mind can see and can bring us into the realm of psychic power and ESP and telekinesis. And the kids are only too imaginative and eager to try these things out. The whole dream in the occult is to open this third eye through meditation and relaxation therapies, and the kids are getting a crash course right here on the Thundercats cartoon. And as we'll see, unfortunately, this is anything but rare. Without a doubt, some of today's hottest cartoon heroes are the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. In one of their videos entitled The Incredible Shrinking Turtles, we learn some of the story of how the turtles have this amazing power that they have. In this instance, we see that an alien fell from space, and as he was lying dying, the turtles ran up to him, and he told them just before he died that there was this magical crystal that had been broken into 3 pieces, and that if it was put together, it would become the Eye of Zarnoth, one of the incredible pictures of occult power. We have the same idea of the third eye that we saw in the Thundercats. And of course, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are able to put this eye back together. And here's what the alien told them about the one who would be able to put this eye together. When the 3 pieces are joined, the possessor will have power undreamed of in your world. And what we see happen with this eye before the turtles get a hold of it, and it is put back together by someone who is a perennial loser, and of course he doesn't realize the power that he has tapped into. And he is listening to one of his self-improvement tapes that we hear so much of today, but now he has the power within his grasp. And he listens to the tape which says, yes, you too can achieve your dream of a better life through the power of positive wishing. Well, we certainly know that we're talking about the power of positive thinking we hear so much about today. And it continues and says, do you yearn to own a luxury limousine? It can be yours if you simply put your mind to it. This perennial loser, who had tried all of these success techniques, finally tapped into the power of the third eye. He finally tapped into the powers of the occult and the power of altered states of consciousness and the powers of this extra portion of his brain, the sixth sense. And now all his dreams came true right before his eyes. So this idea of a third eye and the power of positive wishing that we saw in the Thundercats is not alone there. One of today's most popular cartoons, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, preaches exactly the same gospel. Perhaps the most blatant example of all of this idea of the third eye and the power of the sword and the power of mysticism is to be found in the cartoon He-Man. At the beginning of the cartoon, we have this narration. Travel with us now through the dimensions of time to the most amazing planet in the heavens. This is Eternia, a land of swamps where unseen demons lie in wait. Eternia is a land of sorcery and magic. There are powerful forces at work throughout the land. But no place is as magical and mysterious as the Castle Grayskull. Within these walls are mysterious secrets and powers beyond imagination. And then we have He-Man say, I am Adam, Prince of Eternia, defender of the secrets of the Castle Grayskull. Fabulous secret powers were revealed to me the day I held aloft my magic sword and said, by the power of Grayskull, I am the power. It's extremely interesting in this instance, this blatant instance in He-Man. This is the beginning of every episode, that the man's name is Adam. You will recall that there is a biblical Adam. And that Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden were tempted by the serpent, who offered them all the power in the universe if they would follow after him. And he said, ye shall not surely die, ye shall be as gods. And it was the very lie that caused mankind to fall. And of course we have this new Adam, who realizes his power how? By lifting aloft his magic sword and saying, I am the power. We have another gospel being preached. A gospel that it was the right thing for Adam to do, to accept this power and these promises of Satan. You will recall that Jesus was offered all the power in the world if he would bow before Satan, but he refused to do it. The gospel of He-Man is the exact gospel of the Garden of Eden. It is the exact gospel that caused Satan to be cast from the heavens. This idea that we are gods and that we have all the power within us, and that if we can use this power, we will become rulers of this universe, or the most powerful man in the universe. It's also interesting that the episodes of He-Man enter with a story about saying we must go. Time grows short, and we have to await the one whose coming is foretold by legend. And of course this one will be a great powerful one who has unlocked all the secret powers of the third eye. And it fits so clearly with the picture of the Antichrist that we know the Bible prophesies for the last days. There is another gospel in the land. And when our children get up and watch the cartoons on Saturday mornings, they are having that gospel preached to them. We think they hear the only gospel they hear on Sunday mornings, but Saturday mornings, it's as deep a gospel as we can imagine that is being preached to them. Unfortunately, it is the gospel of Antichrist and not of Christ. The Thundercats, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Visionaries, He-Man, these are only a few examples. We have to watch these cartoons with our children and make sure we know exactly what it is that is being force-fed into their little minds.
A main feature in the occult world is the use of visualization, and in this process the person using visualization would create in their mind or play over and over again in their mind a power or some skill they would like to possess. For example, in the athletic world, athletes will often play over and over again in their mind the perfect volleyball serve, and at some point they claim that they actually do pass over from imagination into reality, and they can perform that perfect volleyball serve that they've been playing over and over again in their mind. And the same happens in the occult world, and this is the danger when children are playing role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons. They play over and over again in their mind, having the possession of some power and being able to cast spells. And the same thing happens once again. They do pass over from imagination into reality. They are no longer creating the scenes in their mind anymore. The scenes and the spells and powers are actually taking place. There's been a great debate over the dangers of the fantasy role-playing games for a number of years now. But despite suspected links between suicides, murders, and Dungeons and Dragons, teachers continue to use the game to enhance the reading and math and imaginative skills of their students. For example, Tom Vercoe of the Toronto Board of Education claimed back in 1985 that he does know the game has come under fire because it's been linked by some to murders and suicides in the U.S. And more recently, the 2 murders in Orangeville, Ontario, Canada were also linked to Dungeons and Dragons. But that's not going to stop him from teaching his students to play the game, he claims. Just 1 month after Vercoe made this comment, a 16-year-old from Killaloe Station in Canada shot himself. His father, Andre Cote, claimed that his son Michael had been involved in the game Dungeons and Dragons at the time of his son's suicide. And Mr. Cote said that he found a poem from the Dungeons and Dragons game on his son's bed, directing him to hide in the woods and forget life and forget light.
Well, is Dungeons and Dragons really a problem, or is this just some old news that we've been talking about for years that has no real effect on the current world and just a game played by so few people that its effects are really unnoticeable in the real world? According to Dr. Thomas Radicki of the National Coalition on Television Violence, he says, "There is no doubt in my mind that the game Dungeons and Dragons is causing young men to kill themselves and others." Likewise, Dr. Arnold Goldstein, a PhD and the director of the Center for Research on Aggression at the University of Syracuse, says the following: I think it's a bad idea to play a violent role-playing game such as Dungeons and Dragons. I must assume that the teachings of destructive behavior will have harmful effects. There was an interview conducted with an ex-D&D player in which he was asked about the concepts of good and evil in the game's Dungeons and Dragons. He said, "There's good in the game, but very little. And anyone who has played it will tell you that evil will triumph over good in this game." Indeed, evidence now indicates that fantasy role-playing games have been a significant factor in at least 125 deaths. In one case in Great Britain, which interestingly was not reported by the American media, a 27-year-old man machine-gunned to death 16 people before killing himself. The action was part of a fantasy role-playing game which was being played by male. The killer, the player, had been instructed to kill in order to earn certain powers. Dungeons and Dragons is a real serious problem. But as we'll see in the upcoming few moments, the problems with role-playing games have moved far beyond Dungeons and Dragons.
Because in Japan, I've heard that they're really into the role-playing games where you don't just bash people and kill them. You go around and you gotta use your head and stuff. But here it's sort of half and half.
That's the last one. Oh yeah, you missed this card. You missed the coin. I know where the coins are. It's just that I can't get them.
Any idea at all that Dungeons and Dragons is a passé concern in the years gone by and that no one really plays it anyway is shot down immediately when we go into our local video store or into the toy stores and take a look at what the newest toys are. Because some of the hottest selling items, of course, are the Nintendo games, and I'm sure we've all heard of Nintendo by now. And as we went into our local video store where they rented the games, we asked the sales clerk and he told us that they were sold right out. That they were rented every night, and the kids who couldn't buy them were just renting them one night after another, every time they could get their $5 to rent the games to play them. So we began to take a closer look at the Nintendo games, and as we walked down the aisles of the video store, we saw the incredibly descriptive titles. I'm looking at here some of the instruction manuals for Final Fantasy, and we'll talk about this in a second, Dungeon Magic, Wizardry, and this was only the beginning of what were in those video counters. Then we went and conducted some interviews with some young men who were video game addicts, so to speak, and who spent all their time at these games, and we learned, as I mentioned off the top of this report, that it's a whole new world out there. These kids are talking in terms we don't understand. They're in front of their video boards, and they totally understand and are entranced in a world that we know nothing about. One of the kids that we interviewed smiled because his mother was off the camera and said, "My mother just can't figure this thing out. She doesn't even know where to turn the keyboard on. Yet this is his whole life, and the generation gap has grown as never before." But to move beyond that and talk about these games, we began, as these children were playing the games and they were describing them to us, we began to look through the instruction manuals. And I have here one for Wizardry, and I don't know if you can see it from here. Maybe we can get another shot of it off camera. You know, the Bible tells us that in the last days that the whole world will worship the dragon. And here we see right on the cover is the dragon. These kids are becoming acclimated to this very kind of thing. And I began to look through the instruction manual, and I see here how to cast magical spells and mage spells and cleric spells. And you go to the pages that it's listed on, in this instance page 41, and they have complete descriptions of how to cast spells and how to contact powerful spirits and how to use these spirits and these powers to overcome, obviously, evil or good, because there's both white and black magic in these books. We picked up another one to see if that was just coincidence, and it's Dungeon Magic here. And we look through again and we see in here Casting Magic Spells, page 22, with a complete description, and it says here, each wizard has mastered a certain type of magic. When you meet a wizard, he will give you 4 basic elements of his mystical studies. So we have a wizard now teaching the children of his magical studies. And then here it says, it is important to remember that the source of all magic is the life force of the user. This is the teaching of the occult. This is exactly what we were introduced into in Star Wars and E.T., that there is some magical power, some life force that runs throughout the universe, and it is this power that we can tap into for either good or evil. Of course, in Star Wars, Luke Skywalker would tap into it for good, and Darth Vader would tap into the same power for evil. So there was no God judging the hearts of mankind. There was no moral code to live up to. We just had this power that we could use at our discretion. And here is this teaching right now in these video games. So it is not just some social misfit who is off playing Dungeons and Dragons in the corner somewhere. Now it's the very Nintendo games. I look at another one here just to show you that this is not just an isolated example. I'm looking now at the instruction guide to one of the Nintendo games, Final Fantasy. And I look in here, page 72, white magic. Page 76, black magic. And once again, it's how you can get in touch with your wizard and learn all the levels of magic. You see, it's not just a simple one little thing. There are 8 different levels of magic, both white and black, that the kids can tap into here. I think we've made the point of the incredible occultism that is contained in all these games. But the important point, and if we can leave you from this report with one bit of understanding, it is that all of these things reinforce each other. We go from the cartoons, to the videos, to the rock and roll music, and now to these video games. And then we go to the educational classroom, and we see that these kids are getting a worldview, one after another, that is building on top of this. We have children who spend, they say the statistics, I've said it before, 7 hours a day watching television. They spend another 2 or 3 hours in front of these video games. By the time they go to bed at night, they have had another gospel preached to them through these cartoons. And hopefully this report is helping to show you that that gospel is a consistent gospel. This just isn't a modge podge of different things that we're picking out, the little bits that we oppose and leaving the rest untouched. From morning until night, it is the gospel that you are God. You have the power within you, and there is this life force that we can tap into for good or evil. And this generation is being set up for a deception, the worshiping of the dragon. And you look at the fronts of these video games, and one after another, it's a dragon pictured or a serpent. And the kids are eating it up and being groomed for the day that lies ahead when the Antichrist is revealed to this world.
And now, allow your eyes to close as you imagine that you are outdoors in a very quiet, peaceful, safe place. This may be a place that you've been to that was quiet and safe and calm. Or it may be an imaginary place. See and feel yourself there. See the colors, hear the sounds, feel the wind, notice the sky. Sense what's around you, what you can touch. And notice how calm and quiet and peaceful you are in this safe, special place. Stay there and enjoy your special place for a few seconds.
In the public schools today, there's no question that the children are under a tremendous amount of stress. Whether it's coming from broken homes, broken families, broken dreams, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, these kids are under pressures that we could never have imagined. And this pressure, the pressure even to succeed, has grown so intense that now the public schools are beginning to introduce relaxation techniques like you just saw to help these kids cope with this stress. In this instance, what you saw prior to a preparation for a test or for the ability to sit down and learn is the attempt to relax these children so that their minds can be focused on their school activities. It seems like such a noble effort. As a matter of fact, the stress in the world today is so high that the #1 claim on workmen's compensation now is stress, and it's trickling right down to the children. The unfortunate problem with these stress situations, these anti-stress techniques that we've seen here, is that the children are put into an altered state of consciousness. What you have seen here is not just some medical technique. What you have seen here is textbook Hinduism. This is yoga. You will have the children doing breathing exercises and relaxing body parts and muscle groups one at a time in an attempt to get their mind empty and to free their mind so that they can be led by another power, so that they begin to hear voices and so that they enter an altered state of consciousness. This is anything but scientific. This is religion in the public schools. And no matter how noble the cause, it's something that's extremely dangerous.
Now close your eyes and just relax while I lead you in a guided fantasy. Imagine now that you're standing in a beautiful valley. Ahead of you is a mountain with a rocky stairway winding up and around the mountain. You begin to climb this rocky stairway. You have magic powers, so climbing is easy. When at last you reach the top, you notice a door. Now open the door. Enter. Now you find yourself in a room where the sun is brightly shining. Look into the rays of the sun. As you do, you notice the face of a very wise person.
Once these children reach this altered state of consciousness, this deep level of relaxation, one of the things they are guided through and told to find is a safe place, a peaceful place where they can be completely at rest. And this imaginary place can be a field or a meadow or beside a river or a stream or on a mountaintop. It doesn't matter. But the children are instructed to get into this peaceful place and imagine themselves totally in control of the situation and totally at peace with nothing to fear. Once the children are at this state, a number of different things can happen. The first is they can be led into a technique called creative visualization. And Johanna Michelson, in her book Like Lambs to the Slaughter, defines creative visualization this way. She says, creative visualization is the technique of using your imagination to create what you want in your life. In creative visualization, you can use your imagination to create a clear image of something you wish to manifest. Then you continue to focus on the idea or picture regularly until you actually achieve what you have been visualizing. Creative visualization is magic in the truest and highest meaning of the word. What we have here is the technique of mind over matter. This is clearly and purely a religious teaching. This is the idea that we can create reality with our minds, and this is the basis of mind science and of the New Age, for example, that whatever we can create in our mind, whatever the mind can believe, it can achieve. This is the core of shamanism. This is the core of sorcery. And this is the hope that is being offered to the world today. The idea that if we can just create something in our minds, we can bring forth its reality. So this is the first place that the children are led in their peaceful place, is towards a creative visualization and learning how to try to manipulate reality with their minds. I think it's something that if most people realized what was going on, they'd be tremendously concerned about. But there's a second aspect of this peaceful place, a second path that can be taken from this peaceful place that we really ought to pay heed to as well.
Now, your wise person is coming towards you. You may ask your wise person anything you want, because this is someone who knows all about you. Okay, it's time to go now. But remember, you can come back to this place or any place that you feel safe anytime you want. And your wise person will be there to answer all of your questions.
Of course, one of the central questions here is just who are these wise persons? Are they just, as the educators tell us, our inner voice or our higher self, or just our inner voice, which is trying to lead us and guide us based on intuitive reality? Or are they instead spirit guides or something we've contacted from the demonic realm? Well, the educators may tell us that this kind of thinking is foolishness. The truth of the matter is that we can go look at the textbooks from the shamans and witch doctors from hundreds and thousands of years ago, and we can hear the tradition and find out that the exact same techniques that are being used in the public schools to contact these wise persons were the exact techniques that witch doctors used to contact their spirit guide from the demonic realm, empowering them to use magical incantations and chants and to tap into another dimension. One of the leading educators in this area was Dr. Beverly Galian, and she was quoted as saying, "We don't call them spirit guides in the public schools, we call them imagery guides." And of course what she was referring to is the fact that let's just change the name so we don't raise an uproar and we don't get people concerned because they believe they're doing, of course, the very best thing. Another example of this contradictory explanation of what's going on here was pointed out by Dave Hunt. Here's what Dave Hunt writes about Dr. Michael Samuel's book entitled The Well Body Book. Says Dave, his identification of this mysterious and apparently all-knowing and all-powerful entity is contradictory and hardly satisfying. On the one hand, Dr. Samuels parrots the psychological explanation so popular today in suggesting that this apparently infallible voice that speaks with its own independent inner voice is simply one of the many forms of the infinite wisdom allegedly residing in each of us. Yet in Spirit Guides, Access to Inner Worlds, Samuel seriously declares that his imagery doctor is actually his personal spirit guide whom he contacted through instructions from Rolling Thunder, a Native American Indian shaman. Just how powerful are these techniques? Are we being led into the occult? Are these techniques which are purported to lead to relaxation and inner guidance actually leading us right into the arms of the occult?
And now, return and open your eyes.
Are these techniques so powerful that the kids have to be led to come out of these very slowly and very cautiously? It's interesting, one of the programs taking place in the school boards is called the Quieting Reflex. And my wife Patty and I were listening to the tapes in our car driving from North Bay to Toronto one time. And as we listened to these tapes and listened to the techniques that are being used on the children, they stopped in the middle of the tape about a half hour in and said, please do not listen to these tapes or this description of an imaginary guide or of a quiet place. If you're operating a motor vehicle, it may cause you to lose touch with reality. Of course, we weren't all that concerned, believing that the Lord had his hand upon us and that we were listening to these for research purposes. But the point is this: if these techniques are so powerful that they suggest not using them while operating a motor vehicle, what is it that's coming into the public schools? This is not science. This is religion. As we've said again and again, it's religion, pure and simple.
In addition to the blatant indoctrination into the occult and witchcraft in our public school system, our educational system is now intensifying its campaign to destroy the minds, souls, and morals of our children. It is preparing them for the occultic humanistic civilization now being created. The New Age mindset is being promoted through textbooks, values clarification, sensitivity training, situational ethics, globalism, multiculturalism, death education, evolution, Eastern religion, group dynamics, group decision-making, socialism, sex education, peer socialism, anything and everything that undermines our Judeo-Christian foundation. The public education system seems to be completely out of control. Generally speaking, though, teachers really aren't at fault. The system is. The system that allows disrespect of teachers and administrators. The system that allows social passing of functional illiterates because retaining them might injure their delicate psyche or self-esteem of the at-risk child.
Before coming to the Omega Letter, I spent several years in Toronto counseling young people who had come into conflict with the law or had trouble at home or at school. Some of these kids were runaways or prostitutes. Some were young offenders. There were drug addicts. There were alcoholics. There were car thieves. There were gang members. Most of all, they were all children. Children who had taken the wrong path somewhere in their lives. What amazed me the most at the time was the intense interest that so many of these kids showed in the occult. Many declared themselves to be witches or warlocks, and almost all of them, and I'm not exaggerating, wore jewelry or had tattoos that expressed this satanic or occultic interest. Many of them tended to gravitate toward heavy metal music, people like Ozzy Osbourne or groups like AC/DC and Black Sabbath. And if you listen to any of these groups for more than a few seconds, you'll see that it's not the quality of music that attracts these kids. It's the image. I asked one 17-year-old who was in for trying to kill his stepfather why he liked Ozzy Osbourne so much. He told me everybody likes Ozzy Osbourne. Man, he tried to kill a chicken on stage once. There's nothing inherent in occultism or Satanism that attracts these kids in the first place. It's almost always the image that they feel they can have. The image to their peers as somebody who's really into something radical, or the rebellion against the authorities like counselors or teachers or parents. If you look at the childhood of many of these kids who become involved in Satanism as teenagers, you'll find that they began their interest in the occult at a very early age. They may have played a lot of arcade games or read bizarre novels. Maybe they were involved in Dungeons and Dragons. But whether it's playing Nintendo or watching He-Man on TV, the theme that they're receiving is the same. They're bombarded with evil thoughts and occultic ideas right from a very early age. And this whets their appetite for later when they become teenagers and they start gravitating toward a peer group of people who share a common interest. As the time passes and the kids get older, their interests become more intense. You move beyond Nintendo and start getting into casual gatherings to talk about the occult or to play Dungeons and Dragons. Gradually, you want to try things that are even more extreme, and you may have a seance. Often they'll try and contact spirit beings or even the spirits of people who have died. Then they might even get into Satan worship, or devil worship as it's known, and they may try animal sacrifices. I remember living in Toronto, the police actually told people to keep their black cats in the house because black cats were a favorite sacrifice for cult groups. During our research for this video, we had the opportunity to talk to several people who sell Dungeons and Dragons games and other role-playing games. If you ask them what they think of the controversy of Dungeons and Dragons games and if there's any danger, they almost always say the same thing. A sick kid is a sick kid, and if he's going to do something and commit a crime or kill himself, he was going to do it anyway. It doesn't matter whether he's playing Dungeons and Dragons or playing Monopoly. This is totally wrong. There are specific messages within Dungeons and Dragons and other role-playing games, as well as in heavy metal music. Those messages tell kids specifically to kill themselves or to kill someone in their family or to harm their teacher in some way. You can't tell me that it's the same telling a kid, a depressed kid or a kid who's disturbed in some way, you can't say it's the same thing to tell him to go kill his teacher as it is to tell him to pay rent for landing on boardwalk. That's an extremely narrow view. Children are extremely impressionable, and it's important in these early formative years to let them know what's healthy and what's responsible. Proverbs tells us to raise up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. That's an awful lot different than telling a kid, do whatever you want to do, because if you do something wrong, you were going to do it anyway.
Well, how do we summarize it all? I think that children evidently are getting a whole new worldview, a worldview that we never knew. For example, when we talk about visualization, you'll notice that we pointed out how it starts in the cartoons with the third eye. And then we moved on to the computer games, how the kids are actually now learning to utilize these powers and these magical spells and the casting of spells. The kids are learning now how to become proficient in the use. But of course, this is just the fantasy world. This is just playing around in games until we get to the public schools. By the time we get to the public schools, the kids are told, no, these ideas that you gained in the cartoons and in your computer games are the real thing. We're now going to practice them in the public school system. And then we move on, and as those of you who read Johanna Michaelson's book, The Beautiful Side of Evil, will know that when Johanna contacted her spirit guide in the occult, she did it using the exact same techniques we had in the public schools. And Johanna will tell you about her experience with Silva Mind Control. And those of you who know someone who've taken this program will know that when they graduate, they are given their money back if at the end of that course, through the use of visualization and psychic power, they cannot identify the illness of someone by just looking at a closed file folder on the desk. When you get to it, you see the end teaching becomes, you are God's. All the power lies within you. You have potential like you've never known. And it's the central teaching of the Garden of Eden. A whole worldview is coming forth here. Another area of concern that we talked about was the use of toys. And in the clip that we saw where my wife Patty talked, she mentioned about the fact that athletes will rehearse something in their mind, believing that if they can see it in their mind, then they can achieve it in the physical realm, and that somehow this mental power will be translated into activity. And of course the children then go to the toy stores, and they've watched their cartoons, and we know that the cartoons have become really nothing but 30-minute programs advertising the toys in the toy store. And the kid will go and, as we saw, get his magic sword. Or he will get these other toys and he will begin to play with them. And he'll begin to act out. And of course, with children and their imaginations, the one thing we know is it's not long until they're out playing with their friends and their imagination becomes alive enough that instead then of calling their friends names or sticks and stones will break my bones, they're casting spells on each other that they've learned in their games. There's a break that takes place here, and it's something that's very dangerous. We're not talking about backward masking here. We're not talking about being paranoid. As a matter of fact, one of the clever things that educators laugh about is how paranoid fundamentalist Christians sound when they complain about these things, because it sounds so outrageous. It sounds so off the wall. But we're not talking about a few words backwards on a record album here that may say something. We are talking about outright indoctrination. We have gone beyond the hidden ideas in the back room of a circus right into the main public school system. There is an agenda. There are ideas that are coming forth, that are being brought purposely forth into the ideas of our children. Let me just summarize that for a second. I want to read you a quote by Grant Tinker from NBC television. He was in charge of programming there. And he said, speaking of drug use in the children, that subtly they can begin to change people's thinking. He says this: if we can start changing attitudes in this country, we can start changing behavior. Likewise, Jay Winston, who's an insider on media programming, said this: we have now come to a place of being nothing short of the application of Madison Avenue expertise to affect the population through mass media. Bonnie Reese, a lawyer, is so convinced that we can change the minds of the children through subtle means in television that she has left her practice now and is trying to weave environmental themes throughout children's programming. And Ted Turner, in our final example of showing just how powerful this shaping is, he produced a series recently, I think it was a 7-hour miniseries, or it may even have been longer, called A Portrait of the Soviet Union. And when he was asked by someone, hey, this does not seem to reflect reality at all, here's what Ted Turner said: when you paint a portrait, you can paint whatever you want. I didn't say it was a true picture. A clear example of this kind of media shaping took place in We Are the World. The idea of raising famine relief for Africa, which was very noble, but there were other ideas planted in there as well. And one of the key organizers of that sting is now traveling the world trying to get our children to become more environmentally conscious. So when our children are listening to their Walkmans and you see them with their earphones on, they're not just listening to rock and roll or the Beatles. It's not the same as when we were younger, just another phase. They're now listening to religious and political indoctrination. For example, MTV produced a series called Our Common Future about saving the environment. Not only were world leaders brought together, but so were the top rock bands. And Melissa Manchester, singing in that special, sang, "I feel sorry for God." She said, "I feel sorry for God that he's burdened with these fundamentalist Christians who can't understand the time we're in." She said, "I feel sorry for God with these televangelists. I feel sorry for God of where Christianity has gone to, not respecting and loving the environment and recognizing we're part of it." John Denver did the same thing. The architects of the New World Order realized that we need a new religion based on the unity of the cosmos if we're going to bring the whole world together. They also recognized that the older generation are not going to accept it. The older generation have made up their minds and have their ideas, and they are now targeting the younger generation. We're producing another video right now on the technology for the cashless society and the mark of the beast. What's interesting as we're shooting these videos over top of each other a little bit is the fact that in the cashless society, the electronic world, the problem is getting the older generation to utilize the technology. The older person still wants to go to the teller and deal face on face with Mrs. Smith at the bank, whereas the younger generation have never seen a teller. They are in and dealing with their automated teller machines all the time. It's that generation gap that we're watching disappear here, and the same thing is true with our children. They're hearing another gospel. I don't want to overstate the case, but America is no longer a Christian country. As a matter of fact, if you look through it through the eyes of the children, they live in an occult culture. And that's a dramatic statement, but I believe it's entirely accurate. If we are going to battle this occult culture, the Lord has only given us certain weapons of warfare. And I believe those weapons of warfare are spiritual and not carnal. Let's take a look at a quote from 2 Corinthians chapter 10. "For though we walk in the flesh, we do not war after the flesh. For the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty through God to the pulling down of strongholds, casting down imaginations, and every high thing that exalteth itself against the knowledge of God, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of Christ." Ephesians chapter 6 tells us that we wrestle not against flesh and blood. The battle is for the souls of the youngsters of this land, and for the not-so-youngsters too. Our battle is in the spirit, it is not in the flesh. It is not primarily through the legislatures or through the courtrooms. This is a spiritual battle. If we are telling our children not to play the video games and not to watch the cartoons that the occult ideas we're seeing, and yet we go out and partake in our own fleshly activities, listening to country and western music instead of rock and roll, and doing things that the children know, these kids are intelligent, they recognize the hypocrisy. And so we have to live in front of our children, not just tell them what to do, but show them. We are living epistles, known and read of all men. You know, in the banks, they will tell a teller when they're looking for a counterfeit to look for the real thing, and learn the real thing, and then they'll recognize the counterfeit. On Sunday evenings, I believe our children should be with us in church. We shouldn't leave them at home to watch the cartoons and America's Funniest Home Videos. They should be with us. And I certainly hope you attend a church that has believes in prayer around the altar and seeking God and waiting for God to move in our hearts and lives. And our children should be right there, right in the midst of things, that they're getting to know the move of God. And they're not at home getting to know the move of man and the move of the flesh and the move of carnality. We've got to know the move of the Spirit of God. And when kids recognize that, then when they see the things of the world, because they are going to see them as they go out onto the streets, they will be able to discern and know the difference between the two. We have to get the children right in the middle of the fire. I don't think there's any age that's too young. The minute a child is born, he should be in every church service that's possible, sitting under the teaching of God's Word. We should have family altars in our home. We all know that these things are true. We all know that there is this other gospel in the land. Now the Lord has called us as children of the light to act upon which we know, to whom much is given, much is expected, to step out and stand out for God and take a firm stand. And if we do so in sincerity and in integrity before God, our children will see that and they will follow along with us. God bless you.